So Scout ends the book with this quote of, well, it'd be sort of like shooting a mockingbird, wouldn't it? And basically, so here is Scout directly calling Boo Radley a mockingbird, okay? Which I think we already knew that because of his innocence, and we're going to discuss that in a minute. But she flat out says it. And so the end of the story says that if it came out that Boo was the one who saved Jim and Scout, that they were not super worried about Boo, or Arthur Radley is his real name, about him being prosecuted, but more about the attention that he would receive. And from what we know about him, he likes to do good, but he doesn't want people to see it and shower him with attention. So she understands that to expose him like that would be to, in essence, kill him. Not physically, but definitely emotionally. She also does another quote that wraps up another theme. If you'll notice, so the Mockingbird theme calls us back to, I think it was chapter 10, where we learn that Atticus says that it's a sin to kill a mockingbird because they don't do anything but make pretty music for us, right? They don't harm people. So she calls back to that. Well, this next quote is also a callback to another quote that Atticus said early on. He said it twice. He said something about walking in a man's shoes, but he also said climbing in a man's skin, right? So Scout says Atticus was right. One time he said, you never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around in them. Just standing on the Radley porch was enough. So Scout is really transforming. We know in the very beginning of the book, we see her as very naive. She doesn't really understand the way the world works. For example, when Walter Cunningham comes over and he pours syrup all over his food, she doesn't get why in the world he would do that. But now she's starting to connect the dots. She's starting to take the wisdom that Atticus has given her and really understand its true meaning. We're not going to go there on that one. All right, so let's look at who were the mockingbirds in this story. So you probably can't see this. I don't know why it did this font so small. But our anchor quote here, let me make these a little bit bigger so we can see. Our anchor quote is about what a mockingbird is, okay? So some of you memorized that for today and said those to me, but here, okay, there we go. So the quote is, mockingbirds don't do one thing but make music for us to enjoy. They don't eat up people's gardens, don't nest in corn cribs. They don't do one thing but sing their hearts out for us. That's why it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. Okay, so we see here that mockingbirds, not only are they innocent, they do things for other people, right? They do things that people can get enjoyment from. They don't cause harm. Okay, so let's look at who the mockingbirds are in this novel. Let's start with Boo Radley because Scout just basically said that he was like a mockingbird. So he doesn't do harm, even though if you'll remember, if you'll call back to the beginning of the novel, there is this speculation that he, does anybody remember what he was speculated to do? Yes, that, but there was also speculation that he harmed his dad, that he stabbed him. I think as we go along, especially with this proclamation from Scout at the end, I think we can see that those are false accusations, that didn't happen because mockingbirds don't harm. He gave Scout and Jim gifts, just like a mockingbird gives the gift of song. He left literal physical gifts for Scout and Jim, if you'll remember in the tree. He also saves Scout and Jim from Bob Ewell, right? So he does good. He checks the box on that. He also, though, is like a mockingbird that's being targeted because the people in the town are creating those rumors about him. Okay, so they didn't shoot the mockingbird in this case, but they came close to it. The next mockingbird is Scout herself. And this one's might be a little more difficult to see. But if we think about Scout from the very beginning, she could intentionally do no wrong. Now, maybe she did wrong unintentionally, but not intentionally. She was very, very innocent. She really did not understand the way the world works. And kids like that in general are. She really does symbolize innocence and childhood purity, just like a mockingbird did. We do see her change throughout the novel. So I don't know if I would say that she ends the novel as a mockingbird, but she definitely starts the novel as one. Now, the biggest one, the one that you could definitely 100% say, this is a mockingbird, in my opinion, is Tom Robinson, okay? So keep in mind, we said a mockingbird is innocent, a mockingbird does good for other people and does not cause harm. So who do we know was innocent in the trial? We know Tom Robinson was, okay? Did he help others? Yes. In fact, that's what got him in trouble, was that like a mockingbird might come close to a shooter so that it can sing, not realizing that it was going to get harmed. Tom Robinson actually went into Mayella's house multiple times to help her with things, not realizing that he in turn would literally end up shot like a mockingbird. So he's innocent, he does no harm, and he actually does good, okay? And it says, one of his testimonies in chapter 19 is, he even says that he feels sorry for Mayella. So he really does have this pure heart, but he's unfairly targeted. In the end, we know that the newspaper editor calls it out as, unjust for him to die. We see that Heck Tate at the end, the sheriff says that, one person's already died unjustly. So we know that it is an unjust killing that ended up in the end. And so Tom Robinson as the mockingbird truly does make sense. So that is the end. That is the end of our book. I want to discuss just a few little themes. I say little, just a few themes that we can glean from the book that we've talked about. Let me make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I know that on, let me see, there is a site that I like that has quotes according to the themes. It's not SparkNotes. It's kind of like SparkNotes, but it's not. Let's see, themes with quotes. And so I'll just bring it up here if I can find it. May not be able to. Okay, let's just, SparkNotes might have the quotes too. I'm always bad about writing down the quotes. Let's just go to that. Okay. Like that. Social. We've talked about this ad nauseum. Law. These to me are not themes, they're topics, so we're gonna X out of that. Actually, let me bring my PowerPoint presentation back up and we'll go through that again. Okay, so the biggest themes that I've identified in To Kill a Mockingbird are, okay, loss of innocence, so we talked about that with Scout. As she changes, she understands and she becomes wiser, but that can also be not a great thing. For example, I have a child of my own who likes to play with toys that some might consider like childish, okay? And she has asked me recently, do I need to stop? Because a lot of my friends are growing up and they like, makeup or whatever. And one of my advice to her is to try to stay a kid for as long as you can. Because as you grow up, you lose that innocence and you carry a burden, the burden of knowledge, the burden of understanding the evils of the world, okay? There can obviously be good things that come along with it as well, but it's not always a great thing. And that's definitely something that we see in To Kill a Mockingbird with Scout. So let's... I talked about the Walter putting molasses on his meat. That supports that fact. And, okay, So we have referred back to our social hierarchy time and time again throughout this novel about social class. But what maybe I haven't talked about is how people at that time perceived that the higher in the social class you were, that the better morals you had. They perceived that if you were educated, if you were Atticus, you had the best morals. Well, we see that affirmed by the book, don't we? Like, Atticus did have the best morals. He did talk about that. And then we see that at the bottom, we have, if we're taking off the black people from the bottom because they were unfairly put there. But if we look at Bob Ewell at the bottom, we see that his morals were the lowest. So in a way, whether unjustly or justly, Harper Lee associates being more well off with having better morals. What do you think about that? Do you think that that is necessarily true?
No.
Why not?
Well, I know this is like, we're a completely different generation, whatever, but even now, like, the people who are rich and famous are kind of sucky.
What, can anybody think of a Bible verse about this? Do you remember how Jesus said it would be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it would be for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven? So Jesus said it's hard to, now it's not impossible, but it's hard to have money and wealth and also trust in Jesus, because you end up putting your trust in possessions, right? So that's an interesting observation that we personally, I might differ from Harper Lee and the way she portrayed things in the novel about morality and wealth. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else that I haven't talked about. Symbolism, we've done that. Courage. Okay, so we didn't delve too much into this, but courage, real courage isn't physically fighting. It is fighting to stay true to your morals and values. That could be seen as a theme of the book, because we have Atticus fighting against social norms. We have the biggest example, like straight out example, was Mrs. DeBose. Remember, she was the one who was addicted to morphine, and so she fought to overcome that. And that's really a I don't know if y'all know the word, I don't think I'm using this correctly here, but a microcosm is when you have like this tiny little subset of something and you look in it and it like can represent a bigger subset. So Mrs. DeBose was kind of like that. Her little chapter, which really didn't add to the progression of the novel any, can still help us to understand more about the novel, about how she was fighting against this evil, even though she knew she was going to die. The evil was the morphine, and she knew she was going to die. Well, Atticus knew that Tom Robinson was going to be convicted, but he still fought, right? So that's a little peek into that. We've got, oh, okay. So another thing that could really support the theme of Scout being innocent was when she faced the mob. Do you remember how she just like went up to them and started talking? She didn't even realize that there was trouble. And she talked to Mr. Cunningham and she's like, what's up? How's Walter? Your entailment's bad. Da, 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 da. She didn't realize the enormity of the situation. And I think that that goes along to what I was saying about how when we're innocent, we don't understand the weight of the world. And Scout did not understand it at that time. So we see how innocent she truly was based on that. Okay, I'm going to end that there. We are not, let me double check my lesson plans. We are not having a final exam in like the multiple choice test type thing. What we're going to do instead is over the weekend, I'm going to give you a prompt to write about, comparing how Scout, or looking at how Scout and Jim have changed throughout the novel. So I will also be posting these notes from my PowerPoint so you can look at some of the key quotes that I have identified, especially Scout within that. Okay, let's see what else. It says on your lesson plan that you need to complete the bento box for tomorrow. I never assigned that, so obviously you don't have to do that. Basically, you don't have any homework for tomorrow, so that's super exciting. You might want to look ahead if you know you have a busy weekend, and you might want to start gathering evidence for how Scout and Jim have changed throughout the novel. I'm going to give you on their... I was going to say I'm going to give this out on Thursday. I will. On Thursday, I'm going to give you out a worksheet that will help guide you in the direction of some quotes as well to support your writing on Friday and Monday so that you don't have to go in that completely alone. Any questions about that? Okay, I will sign off here.